And go ahead, Danny, you can go to the next slide. So we've already done our little check-in through our Slido poll where we asked how people are feeling currently about reframing and how able they feel to implement it. And we're going to get a refresher on reframing family engagement from the wonderful Sherri Wilson. Then I'm going to share some examples from work that's been done at the Federation as well as the Ohio Statewide Family Engagement Center, where we're using reframing. Then we're going to do breakout groups, or maybe we'll just stay in this group. We'll see how that works out, to really dig into what we can do in our own work to push reframing family engagement forward. And then we're going to talk about next steps. So I'm going to now, you can go forward a couple of slides actually, Danny, because I had the Slido up.
Hold on, we're having some technical difficulties here.
You have like a little pen up instead of a...
Yeah, I don't know why that's happening right now. Okay, there we go.
All right, you can go forward another one. And I'm going to turn it over to Sherri.
That's not happening. Stop it.
Sherri, you're muted.
Yep. Go back one more, Danny. There you go.
There we go.
Because I wanted to start by just checking in to see what people might remember from our Reframing Institute. It was a long time ago. It was 2020, and really today, these days, time has no meaning. So you may not remember anything at all, and that is okay. But I would love it if you could type into the chat box exactly what you do remember. If you have any sense of what framing is at all, just take a stab at that in the chat box. Does anybody have any memories of framing? Here we go. Okay. Framing refers to a starting point or a platform. Thank you, Maria. That's right. It's sort of like the way we set up ideas or information for people to understand. Pam, I love that you put the rocket ship because we are going to talk about that. That is one of the recommendations for the way that we frame about family engagement. Lisa says there was 5 areas of focus. It's actually 6, Lisa, but I'm going to remind you of what those are today. Julie says, I don't have a great definition, but I remember it being about how a message is shared out. That's exactly what it is. It's the way that we position information so that when people see the information, it triggers either productive thinking or, unfortunately, sometimes it triggers unproductive thinking. Asieri, I'm so sorry, I'm not saying this right. Asiriani, thank you. I'm going to try and master that before we leave today, Asiriani. She wrote, collaborative approach among stakeholders and families. It can be. It's really a great idea always to get family voice when you're thinking about how you communicate your message. Cambria says it's our point of view and the way we communicate it. That's exactly right. We also want to make sure as we're thinking about how we communicate family engagement, we're doing it in ways that align with what the experts in the field call family engagement and the way that they think about it. Choices on how we say and share things, exactly right. The way we connect and engage families, it can also be the way we connect and engage other stakeholders like policymakers or funders. Cambria says it's a research-based way to communicate and message, and that is exactly right. It is what we are talking about today is based on the research that was done by the Frameworks Institute. And it's really important that we communicate in ways that are going to lead our audience to where we want them to go. And unfortunately, in the past, we've often communicated about family engagement in ways that lead them away from where we want them to go. So Danny, let's go to the next slide and watch a little video that kind of explains framing. The The reason frames are important when it comes to issues like family engagement or even education in general is because if we can properly frame their messages and the way we communicate, then we can change the way our audiences communicate about family engagement. If we change the way they talk to each other about family engagement, we are changing discourse. Ultimately, framing is a strategy that can shift the public narrative. This is helping people think differently about a problem and then think differently about solutions. That expands the possibilities for how we approach family and community engagement as systemic issues that need supporting policies. Framing is important because it has the power to influence people's understanding of family and community engagement and the power to shape our response. Thank you. Yes, Cambria, that was a video scribe video, which is my favorite thing as well. This video is actually a part of the Reframing Academy that I mentioned earlier that we'll give all of you access to. And it's just to help you start to think about framing in a meaningful way. Next slide, please. The reason frames are important when it comes to issues like family engagement or even education in general is because properly frame their messages and the way we communicate, then we can change the way our audiences communicate about family engagement. If we change the way they talk to each other about family engagement, we are changing discourse. Thank you. So now I want to think about why framing is important. Once we understand that framing is the way that we communicate our messages so that audiences understand what we want them to understand, then we start to get an idea of why the frames are so important. It's easy to send out a message that you think everybody is going to receive and understand, and then they'll all be super supportive of the work that you want to do. Unfortunately, we can't always be sure that that's the reaction that they are going to have. So on the next slide, we're going to watch a video from Dr. Nat Kendall Taylor, who's the CEO of the Frameworks Institute, and he's going to explain why frames are so important. Next slide, Danny.
Have a communications problem. You have a problem of perception. And the problem looks something like this. That you all have been in positions at one time or another where you think you have the most perfect, awesome, slam dunk, whatever sports metaphor you want to use, way of talking about what you do and why it matters. I mean, heck, it works with two of your closest colleagues. What could go wrong when it goes out to normal people, people who don't eat and breathe and sleep your issues all the time? And you find that when this idea that made so much sense to you goes outside of your immediate circle, it does one of two things. So first of all, it lacks resonance. It doesn't have grip. It goes in one ear and out the other. Secondly, probably more unfortunately, because it happens more frequently, I think, that thing which worked and was so brilliant in your own head goes out and it has the exact opposite effect on the people you're trying to persuade, on the people you're trying to communicate with. And I'm not going to ask you to take my word for anything today, right? I'm going to show you evidence from the research that I do with my team that shows this. And I have a lot of pieces of examples of evidence of this you say, they think, this loss in translation effect. I'm going to show you one today that comes from some work that we've done to translate the science of early childhood development. And so people who are in this field, people who are developmental scientists, really want to talk about adversity and stress and the effects that stress and adversity can have on young kids. And they say things like this, that persistent stress can derail development and have negative long-term effects on health and well-being. And if you're a developmental scientist, you replace negative with deleterious because that's the way you talk. And so for folks who are in this field, this is true. There is an incredibly deep body of science across a number of disciplines which supports this point. Unfortunately, when you take this idea out to normal people, to members of the general public, you get things that look and sound like this.
Life's hard. It's supposed to be hard. You know, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. You know, all the bad cliches you can think of. I mean, there's been people that have come from absolutely nothing to make it and whatever society's eyes deem success.
So just to make it really crystal clear, that which you just heard was not the intended effect when this expert opened his or her mouth to deliver this message.
Next slide, Danny.
You have a communications problem. You have a problem of perception. And the problem.
So one thing we know is that we have in the past often sent out messages that we thought were really going to hit the mark, that they were going to, if we just shared this one message, everybody would support family and community engagement. People would be on board. They'd probably be throwing us wads of cash to help us advance the work that we're doing because they understand how important it is. And unfortunately, what we've discovered with the research that Frameworks did is that was not the case. And in fact, most of the messages that we have sent out in the past, any of us, have been having the opposite effect. So one thing we know is that what people understand about an issue depends a lot on how that issue is framed. And if we really want people to pay attention to the messages we're sending, and more importantly, to do things about it, then we have to frame our messages carefully so that we are leading people to more productive thinking. That doesn't mean we're trying to change anybody's minds. It just means that we are helping them think about the issue the way that we think about it. Let's watch another video from Dr. Kendall Taylor about why understanding is frame dependent. Next slide, Danny.
The choices that you make as communicators matter. Sometimes the little things, the pronouns that you use, the verbs that you choose, sometimes the big things, the values that you use to explain why your issue matters, those things matter. Those things have frequently dramatic impacts on what people are willing to do and how people are willing to act and engage on your issues. And again, I don't want you to take my word for it. I'm going to give you a quick example that shows you that understanding is frame dependent. And this example comes not from the United States, but from the Canadian province of Alberta. And a quick geography lesson, Alberta is one of the tall, skinny ones in the middle of the country. It's kind of all you need to know. It's very cold for this example. And so there's a group of experts and advocates in Alberta who are working to change policy and practice around addiction. They're working to take what we know from science and use it to implement better policies and practices around addiction in this province. And they've been having a great deal of difficulty doing this. A lot of their problem comes from the fact that there's zero support to do anything different when it comes to addiction in this province. And so they came to us and they asked us to conduct some work to figure out how to engage members of the public more productively, to move understanding, and specifically to increase support for a set of evidence-based policies. And so as good framing geeks and dweebs, we do what good framing geeks and dweebs do. We ran an experiment. And in this experiment, we tested 3 different values messages. And so you see the values messages along the horizontal axis of this graph right now. And so some people, so this is a large experiment, 6,000 people, which, believe it or not, is not the entire population of Alberta. It's a representative sample, not an exhaustive sample. Each of these 6,000 people is randomly assigned to one of these messages. So if some folks got the value of interdependence, which in this case is the sense that we need to do a better job of dealing with addiction in this province because we're all connected. What influences one of us influences all of us. Other folks got this value of ingenuity, which is an innovation value, that we are a province of problem solvers. You kind of swing your arm when you do this one. There's never been a problem that we haven't been able to solve with some good old Albertan grit and roll up your sleeves problem solvingness. That was my Albertan accent. I don't know if you caught that. That's very important. And other folks, last but not least, got this value of empathy, which is the sense that we need to do a better job of dealing with addiction in this province because people who deal with addiction are people too. They could be our mother, brother, father, sister, neighbor, whomever. And as individuals, we need to show these folks compassion. So what you're going to see on this next click is what I think are 3 beautiful blue bars will appear on this screen. And what those blue bars are going to show you is the extent, the degree to which hearing these different values changes people's support for these evidence-based policies. So can anyone do a good drum roll? Please play along. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So you should see 3 blue bars and notice two things. So first of all, two of these values, interdependence and ingenuity, make people, to a statistically significant degree, more supportive of these evidence-based policies. That is good news when we run these experiments. And when we get results like that, we stand up, we do a little framing dance. Not going to do it right now, don't worry. We sit back down and we look towards the right-hand side of the screen. The value of empathy is actually depressing people's support for these policies. Right? Now, the kicker is that in a subsequent piece of analysis where we looked at all of the field's external facing materials, guess which value we found to be in place over 90% of the time? Empathy. Thank you. Not a rhetorical question. And so what this field has been doing for a very long time is endorsing a value which actually drives support down for the very policies that they're advocating. So this example does two things. It clearly shows you that that understanding is frame dependent and frames matter. It also shows you that these questions, which values to use, how to communicate, are empirical questions. We don't have to guess. We don't have to use our guts. We can use social science.
So that video in particular is it's really powerful for me because this was the moment that really opened my eyes about the way that we frame our messages and the way we communicate about family engagement, because I imagined myself as somebody who would be communicating about substance abuse, and the value of empathy is absolutely the way I would have gone with that. I would have thought, if we just talk about how awful it is for people who suffer from substance abuse issues, and we have it in our power to make things better for them, I just imagined that everybody would be on board with that. It never occurred to me that that would actually backfire and that people would be less supportive of those evidence-based substance abuse policies and practices. And that to me was like a light bulb went off in my head, and I thought, wow, the way I've been communicating about family engagement and the way I've seen others communicate about it is the same thing. We talk about it in a way because we care, and we talk about it in a way that we assume that everybody will understand our message and support the work that we do. And the reality is, because we hadn't relied on those empirically tested methods to communicate about our issue, we were often shooting ourselves in the foot. Next slide, Danny. So one of the really important things we talked about in the Institute, and it's a big part of our academy as well, are the cultural models. So when I mentioned that when we communicate about family engagement in ways that lead people to unproductive thoughts, that's when those cultural models come into play. All of us have hundreds and hundreds of cultural models in our minds all the time. And they are things that our mind uses as a shortcut to make sense of information. And unfortunately, when we send messages out that haven't been tested and aren't using appropriate frames, people tend to just use one of the cultural models that's in their minds already. And some of those have really negative effects. And so it's important that we understand what cultural models are out there and think about how we can avoid triggering those when we communicate messages about family engagement. So Danny, if you can click on this video, I'm going to let Sean Adamak talk a little bit more about what those cultural models are.
As humans, we use shortcuts that our brains have created to make sense of the world. A friend tells you they went camping for the weekend, and your brain immediately conjures up not just images and ideas related to the camping, but also beliefs and values about the campers. You won't even know you're doing it, but it's actually a critical element to engaging with each other as humans. The same thing happens when we're exposed to social issues. If you're engaged in a conversation about education, your brain accesses the shortcuts that it's created related to the concept of education, the people involved, and all of the issues related to that subject. These patterns can be helpful, or they can be disruptive and very difficult to break through. Our goal is to give audiences a new way of thinking about family engagement. This is important because based on our research, the way people currently think about family engagement actually prevents them from understanding it.
Sean Adamak is an international expert on communications in general, and he was one of the speakers that was at our Family Engagement Reframing Institutes. So he knows a lot about these cultural models. And Danny, if you'll go to the next slide. One thing we can tell you is some cultural models will trigger that unproductive thinking. They'll lead people to a place where they're thinking about our issue in a way that is not going to help us. And some of them may lead people to a negative place, or they may lead them to the place where we want to go. So we need to be aware of those so that we can use them in appropriate ways. And then there are some cultural models that are out there that are actually really beneficial, that if we tap into those, it leads people in the direction that we want them to go. So on the next slide, you'll see a summary of some of the cultural models that were identified when frameworks did their research. These are things that are out there in the public and things that they think about all the time anyhow, and we have to do what we can to lead them to the right ones and away from the wrong ones. So you'll see the first column is the green column. These are cultural models that we should actually try to tap into, because when we tap into these cultural models, people support research-based, evidence-based policies and practices that lead to the kinds of outcomes we're looking for. Many people believe already that parents and families should be actively engaged. That is a given, and we can tap into that and it'll be really helpful for us. They also think that engagement should start when children are young. One of the things they found across all audiences was a belief that families should be involved in what their children are learning from an early age. Most people also believe that schools should be welcoming environments, that they should be welcome to students as well as to families and community members. And they believe that when families are engaged, students are going to have better outcomes. So those are good ones. And if we can continue to trigger people to think about family engagement and tapping into these cultural models, we'll be golden. The one you see in the yellow bar is actually interesting because this is a cultural model that's widely held by educators. Educators feel like schools are families, and that can be positive or negative the way that they think about it. And so we just have to be aware of that when we're communicating about family engagement to educators. We need to be aware of whether we're triggering this in a positive way or a negative way. And then the ones you see in the last column in the red are the ones that are things we need to avoid. The tangible triad, the care transference, the traditional engagement, and the culture of poverty are all really harmful cultural models. And if people start to think about family engagement using these cultural models, they will not support the work that we know needs to happen. The tangible triad is essentially thinking of that schools and what matters in schools are just parents, teachers, and students. Those are the only three. And so when we communicate about family engagement and we use language that references families, schools, and students, we sometimes trigger that tangible triad cultural model. And people, when they think about that, they leave out the community altogether. They don't recognize that community partners and community members play a really important role in how successful schools are. And even more importantly, then they start to think that this is all dependent on having a really good teacher or a really good school or a parent who they perceive as caring. And the problem with that is when we trigger that, people don't support policy that leads to these good practices because they think, it's not really necessary if you just have those three key players. And what we know is that the policies that schools and school districts and even states have can lead to opportunities for families and communities to be engaged, or they can prevent those things from happening. And policy is a really important role. The next one is the care transference. So this is the one that when people talk about caring teachers or families who care so much for their children, you will definitely trigger the care transference cultural model. And in the care transference cultural model, it definitely becomes an individual responsibility for family engagement, and that completely erases the policy that we know needs to be in place to support these things. Also, it leads people to be very judging. Like, if you're not there, if you're not participating in every single activity that the school offers, you must not care. Or only the teachers who care are good teachers. So if there are teachers who are struggling and don't have the resources or support they need, it becomes their fault because they don't care enough. The care transference can be really dangerous. Traditional engagement is another one that is problematic, because when you communicate about family engagement in ways that trigger the traditional engagement approach or model, people think that it's what happens at school is the learning, and that families do parenting and values at home, and those two things don't intersect. And what we know from the research is what families do at home that supports the learning actually has a really big effect on student outcomes. And we also know that students don't turn off their learning valve when they walk out of the school door. Wherever they go in the community, there are opportunities to reinforce things they've been learning at school. So the traditional engagement model also cuts the community out of that picture entirely. And then finally, the culture of poverty is one of the most dangerous cultural models to trigger. When we talk about students who go to school in low-income communities, we tend to trigger the culture of poverty, where people assume that if you're poor, then you care less about your child or your child's education, that you're not going to do whatever it takes to support their children's education. Lots of really dangerous bias, and it's just among the worst cultural models. And we sometimes trigger that inadvertently when we're trying to communicate about wanting to help kids who come from communities that are less affluent. But the effects of that are really dangerous. Okay, next slide, Danny. So don't play the video yet. I just want to set it up and talk about when we were together in our Reframing Institute, we actually talked about the specific recommendations that the Frameworks Institute had for how we communicate about family engagement, but we didn't spend a lot of time talking about the factors that have to be present to set this up. So because we've been working on the Academy and it's 10 modules, it's quite intense, we've had the luxury of being able to add a bit more information. So this should be new for you, but I think it really sets up the framing recommendations nicely. These are the conditions that have to be present. Okay, Danny, go ahead and roll that tape. There are 3 strands that make up the family engagement framing strategy. The first strand is to orient your communications towards equity. This can be done when you couple an inclusive vision of opportunity with a grounded diagnosis of the inequities. Second, explain the role of context. Show how institutional factors, those formal programs and policies, can either prevent or promote engagement. And finally, illustrate the transformative power of engagement. Help people see the scope and depth of the benefits of engagement and how it transforms the education system and communities. These 3 strands animate the reframing strategy and run through the specific recommendations. By consistently pointing to the conditions necessary for family, school, and community partnerships, we can broaden our understanding of what engagement involves and help people recognize the importance of policy in better supporting it. By demonstrating how standard practices make engagement difficult, if not impossible, for many families, we can orient people toward equity and help them see what kinds of programs and policies are needed. Clearly showing how equitable engagement can improve outcomes for everyone in a community builds support for robust changes to the educational system. Each of these framing items makes a difference on its own, but woven together, they become a powerful and comprehensive framing strategy that centers engagement as a critical component of child development and student success. So this is, these are the conditions for engagement that have to be present for us to
make up
to really, thank you, Danny, to really do this work well. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide and see what the actual recommendations are. And these might ring a few bells for you because these are the things that we focused on more deeply when we did the Reframing Institute. The first one is using the value of opportunity for all to communicate why engagement is important for us. So using the opportunity for all value helps people see that this is something that matters to all kids, and people deeply believe that we all have the should have the opportunity to succeed in life and in school. So when we trigger that, people tend to be very supportive of the programs and practices that we know are most effective. The second recommendation is using concrete examples and clear explanations of equity. So I didn't put the video in today, but we have a video in the Academy of people talking about their definition of equity. And one of the things that's very clear is that if you do not work in this field and you are not an equity expert, many people are very confused about what equity means. And it's important for us to really use concrete examples when we talk about it. We also learned in the Institute that if you pair the opportunity for all value with the concrete examples and explanations of equity, it increases the power of both of those values. The next one is interdependence, and this one from the research we learned works especially well with educators. When we talk with educators about family engagement and we rely on the value of interdependence, that we're all in this together, and it shouldn't be an individual teacher's responsibility, it's everybody's responsibility to ensure that all of our students have every opportunity to succeed. That is really powerful, and educators in particular responded extremely well to that value when it was tested. The fourth one is the metaphor. So this is an explanatory metaphor. It's different from the literary metaphors that you may think of otherwise, but the explanatory metaphors really paint a picture for people about why engagement is so important. And the explanatory metaphor that we learned about in the Institute that was tested and came out exceptionally well was the space launch metaphor. We know that when we talk about family engagement like it's a space launch, people suddenly understand that it takes a team of experts. It's not just a school or a classroom or a teacher that matters. We all have an important role to play to ensure that every student has every opportunity to succeed. Also, with the explanatory metaphors, a lot of people in the institutes, whenever we do them, think, oh, that's a good idea. We should have our own metaphor. And they try really hard to come up with a metaphor that's going to be something that's perfect for them. And that's problematic because, again, if you're sending out messages that are untested, you don't really have any way of knowing what the results are going to be. In one of the institutes that we did, somebody suggested we start using a new metaphor like barn building. I think they lived in a very rural community where people in their community would respond, they believed, would respond really well to barn building. But I am a city girl, and that definitely would not resonate with me. And so we tried to gently encourage them, make sure you're using one that is tested and that you know you can expect the kinds of results that you're looking for. Because otherwise, again, if you look back at the substance abuse research that they did in Alberta, if you're using a value or a metaphor that's untested, you have no way of knowing if you're actually triggering those cultural models that are going to lead people to unproductive thinking. And the space launch metaphor was tested and worked exceptionally well. And they tested several other metaphors like cooking and infrastructure. None of those did nearly as well as the space launch. The next one is foregrounding benefits to teachers and students. And so a lot of times we do talk about the benefits to students when families and communities are engaged. We often do not talk at all about the benefits to teachers. And so making sure that we're putting those messages front and center when we're communicating about family engagement really elevates the message in the field. And then the last one is using parents to advocate for parental benefits. This one was kind of surprising, but what we learned was we can communicate using all these other strategies all day long, but when families hear the value of these benefits or these strategies from other families, it resonates more with them, it carries more weight. So encouraging parents to communicate about their experiences in engaging in their children's education and the success that they've seen as a result is a really powerful strategy that we are trying to encourage more people to use. So that's it for me. I wanted to take a break now and just open it up for discussion and talk about what you guys are thinking, or if you have any ideas or questions or thoughts about this or any of the stuff we've talked about in the past. Hello, is anybody out there?
I don't want to be the first one to talk, so I'm going to leave it quiet for a minute.
Maybe we should turn the slides off, Danny, and let everybody just come on camera if they want. You don't have to. But we're such a small group. I thought it would be nice if we could just have a conversation about maybe your experiences or some of your thoughts around what we've seen today or in the past.
All right. I am so thankful. And I do want your slides because the way it was explained, it really helps someone to really forget the bias that we have, really. Thinking that we know what we need to offer the multi-language family, especially that we are serving, but step back and really appreciate what they are bringing. And the last part that I want to say something is about, bringing the parents. To me, I always felt that the message that I'm sharing has so much power when it comes from a parent's view or words. And to me, it's inviting them, having them in, even though, the law really requires to hear their voice, that they have their input. But to me, that is crucial, and I'm very thankful for this.
Thank you. And also, I think that since this is going to be recorded, you'll have the recording as well. I don't know if Cambria was planning on sharing the slides or not, but
if it's okay with you, then yeah, I can share the slides with everyone here. So after the session, I'll send out the recording and the slides because we had 30 people register, obviously who couldn't show up. So we'll let them look through the slides and watch the video on their own time.
I see you, Adriana. It looks like it's a go with the slides.
All right, great. Soraya, I want to kind of jump off of what you just said about the parent voices. I had actually forgotten that was part of the reframing. And, but I knew in my mind that that was something we're trying to do, is use family voice to encourage particular types of family engagement, kind of like success stories. And we have a few videos that we've shared in the past of families explaining how powerful particular family engagement techniques have been for them. So I'll drop some links to those in the chat, and I'll probably add them to the end of the slides too, because I forgot that was part of reframing. Maybe that's why our team was thinking it was important to share those stories. I don't know.
Well, one thing I will say though about the audience is the the parent voice messages resonate the most with other parents. When you're communicating to educators, what works best is communicating with a message of interdependence. So one thing you need to think about as you're constructing your messages is who is your audience going to be, and then tailoring your messages to those audiences. And even if you have parent messages for educators, as long as they're leading with that interdependence piece, educators were less enthusiastic about parent messages about parent benefits than other parents were. They were more enthusiastic about what's going to help us do our jobs better and support our kids better. And that's where that interdependence thing came in. So Adriana says, or Adriana, I'm sorry if I'm saying it wrong, what would work with district leaders? So with district leaders, I would focus a lot on the space launch. I would make sure that you're talking about how important it is for everybody to play a role, that you can't successfully launch a rocket without a team of experts. And so you can't successfully launch a child without that team of experts. And so it's important for everybody to be involved. I would also, especially with district leaders, I would also do some work around the opportunity for all, making sure that they understand that the whole reason we're doing anything that we do is so that every child has the opportunity to succeed. And if you're able to couple that with a message about some of the current inequities in their district or their system and how this family engagement piece could help alleviate some of those and really create more equitable opportunities for all families to support every child, I think that would also be really powerful. Other questions or comments?
I feel like it's Adriana again.
Hey, Adriana.
Hi, it's so hard to create buy-in at top district level, but also to create a culture of engagement. When you have strong family engagement liaisons in the district, it's almost as if the stronger they get in the community, the less the rest of the district does. Mm-hmm. And then it becomes anything that happens, they just pass the family engagement business cards and it becomes our problem to solve. And which we do because we care, but at the same time, we're not creating that culture of engagement. It's everybody's job to be doing that, just not the family liaison people in the district.
Yeah, Adriana, I think you have nailed it. It is so nice when a district can afford to have staff that they hire and that can do family engagement support and family engagement work either at the district level or at the building level. Unfortunately, when those staff get hired, then a lot of people think, oh, well, that's their job. That's not my job anymore. Now we've got Adriana. She's going to be doing all the family engagement. And that's not really how it's supposed to work. Exactly. And so, yeah, I know. So it's important that you in particular should be using that space launch metaphor to talk about how there's not one person that launches a rocket. It can't just be one person that engages all families and then all kids are going to do well. It's everybody's responsibility. And just as a side note, there was some research out of the University of Illinois in Chicago a couple of years ago, I think, that talked about teachers being the primary point of contact for families when it comes to family engagement. And it's really up to the teachers. They play the most important role. They're the experts in the curriculum. They know where kids are struggling and what families could do at home to help. So it's important to communicate that, we're all in this together and the teachers have a vital role to play. And when they play that role, we all build the capacity to support our kids so that they have every opportunity to succeed. Cambria, yes, give me a second and I will actually put a link to the article in the chat box. While I'm looking for the link though, what else?
Yeah, but one thing that you say to me, it's so important as you're talking about policy. I think it's important also to add family engagement part of the curriculum. What do I mean by that? If teacher is really the first point of contact, and we already know that they are the one connecting with those kids on a daily basis. I know, they always say it's a lot, it's too much on teachers. However, if it is part of the structure of the curriculum, because sometimes we do the check-in in the morning, right? Kids can say whatever they want to, how they are feeling, whatever. I think if we start, putting that, and it's really about the administration really buying in, as Adriana was saying, to really understand the importance of it. And it's not my job just because I'm there. It's my job. I'm working in silo, but it's just all of us working together. I'm just thankful for this moment.
Yeah, I think you're right.
And I really,
Soraya.
Oh.
Soraya is a good preacher of it.
well, I was going to say to all of my, district people here, when things work, when something clicks and goes well, call me. I want to hear about it. I want to hear the success stories, because I know you all are doing the work every day. I want to hear about the good stuff. So make sure you let me know when you figure out what that little magic key is.
Can I interject and just give you an example, because I am working from the district, and I do, along with my other colleagues, we find ourselves like, once something is there, we have a feeling that they believe belong to us. But anyways, talking about how we are implementing the framework, we understood from the very beginning that we were responsible to support the schools. And also what came out of another meeting that we have with Nelson was that there is a particular group of stakeholders in the schools that is basically forgotten. And let's talk about paraprofessionals. They don't do so much professional developments. They don't have a network among themselves. So we decided to work with them with the framework in a way that everyone, yes, and I don't know, Jackie took a little break right now, in a way that everyone understands the concept of, why we're doing this together. And it takes every single one around the child to understand how we're gonna do it, because otherwise it's not gonna work. So we also understood that the framework was very condensed, very heavy when it comes to documentation, and we needed to understand the level of understanding from the paraprofessionals' perspectives. And so we had to take the framework, and with the suggestion of Donna, to work at one point at a time. For instance, are we going to be working with the elements, or what type of the framework we're going to be working with? So we decided to work with the elements one by one, so they kind of understand like everything. And we also gave them a lot of examples as to what it is, because it's like you're saying, Ms. Wilson, that if we don't explain the why, it's going to be more complicated. Mm-hmm. So we did that. But I agree with you guys, working from the district is a very different dynamic. Very, very different.
I'm so excited to hear that you're working with paraprofessionals, and a couple of updates that might be helpful for you is that by the end of the month, we should have a family-friendly version of the frameworks. It's just, some of you may have already seen the drafts of it, because I think some people were giving feedback. So we'll have a family-friendly version available soon. And actually just today, Danny sent the modules out for translation into Spanish, and Siriani is working on translation into Portuguese. So we're going to have more access points for getting more people the information. So awesome. Stay tuned. And Maria and Jackie, let me know if you all need any assistance with your paraprofessional programming, because that's really exciting. It's something we're happy to see.
Definitely. We also have one that was done for the principals only. Yeah, more in depth. We need to get everyone. We need to get everyone on board.
Yes. Okay, this is very exciting. Thank you. Sherri dropped the article into the chat. Thanks.
It's like a Christmas miracle. I mean, I don't even know how I found it, but then I learned how to upload a document to the chat box just now. So
It's
It
a
says need
learning day for
access.
everyone.
Sorry, it says need access.
Oh,
I don't know if
no.
I'm touching the right thing.
okay. Let me see if I can fix that.
Adriana is asking if the fundamentals are going to be put into an interactive survey form. And my answer to that is yes, but not immediately, but it is going to happen. We're working on it right now. All right, any more comments or questions about Sherri's refresher? All right, so I'm going to just show you all a few examples of the ways we've used reframing in materials for the Federation. And these are a starting point, in part to show you that if you haven't started reframing at all, that they're just tiny little things that you can do to get started, and also to get feedback from you all, for you to show me how we can push forward and do more. And I already have more ideas based on Sherri's presentation. So Danny, do you mind sharing the slides again so I can show you all a few examples? And as we show the examples, if you all could just think about what we were trying to accomplish here, if we were going for opportunity for all, or concrete examples, or interdependence, the space launch, benefits to teachers, or having parents speak. So we'll talk about like what we were trying to do and see if we hit the mark. Okay, Danny, I think you can go to the next one. Okay, so this first one is just the Federation's web page. There's a section you can click on that says community engagement for parents and families. And Danny, if you go forward one more, it should make it big. Oh, no, it didn't work. I thought it was going to focus in. Boo, my slide didn't work. All right, then I will read it to you instead. Back up one. Yep. So this is from the Federation website, and let me find the link so I can read it, because I sure can't read that. It's too small. So the section that I wanted to highlight for you is that we talk about high quality family and community engagement leading to improved social, academic, and health outcomes for children and youth. And then furthermore, and then we just quote from the Frameworks Institute, which is a really easy way to use this reframing, is to actually take the words that the experts came up with. So it says, furthermore, engagement strengthens families by connecting them with community resources and new social networks. It helps schools by improving teacher satisfaction, school climate, and school performance. And it strengthens communities by forging stronger connections between families, schools, and communities, and helps create more engaged citizens. And that comes directly from the From Caring to Conditions document that the Frameworks Institute put out. So I would love to hear, what do you all think we were going for in using that kind of language and pulling from the Frameworks Institute? I can copy and paste the words in here in the chat so you guys can see it more clearly.
I like it.
Wait, did you say that, Sherri?
Yes, I like it.
Okay.
This is Melanie, and I like that it appeals to the data-driven, aspect of education, which I feel like everything that from a policy perspective and teachers' perspective needs to be research-based and data-driven.
But also adding the stakeholders, to me, it's really one of the powerful tools that we tend not to think of. I had a meeting with some parents, and they are able to say, I am able to do this or that because someone in the community, a nonprofit organization, this person helped me or guide me. And I think the school has the same ability to do that, to connect with stakeholders and just be as one to do this work. So to me, that's really
Great.
most
So that
powerful
kind
ones.
of hones in on the interdependence piece that Sherri was talking about.
Yeah, I also see some foregrounding benefits there. I like it.
All right, and see, we just took a quote straight from their work. So as long as you cite them, I highly encourage you to use their language. Danny, you can go to the next one, which is a very similar example. All right, so this is a communication that we put out for district leaders, for superintendents and principals about equity-driven family engagement. And okay, Danny, try to go forward one and see if this actually worked this time. One more. Okay, this time it did bring up the highlighted one. So here we use the same quote, the engagement strengthens families. You can tell I like this quote a lot, and I encourage you to use it too. Engagement strengthens families by connecting them with community resources and so on. The same quote, but I just wanted to show you that we're using it in a couple of different contexts. And if other people have little pieces of the reframing work that they like to share that they find really powerful, then please share them with the group. This one really speaks to me and is one that we've used in a few different types of publications. Okay, you can go to the next one. All right, this one is from the Ohio Family Engagement Center. And it is a one-page brochure that, and I'll send you all links to all of these things and the follow-up email. I love this kind of primer for families about helping support their middle schoolers. I especially like it because I'm the parent of a middle schooler, and so I need this information. But just looking at it quickly, which of the strategies do you see employed in this? You don't even have to read the words. You could just look at the pictures and get a hint.
I'm gonna go out on a limb and say space launch.
Yay! That's right. You know, another nice thing about the Ohio Statewide Family Engagement Center is, as a center, they really embraced the frameworks research. They were actually one of the first to hear about the research when it was done, and they immediately started incorporating some of the messages into the work that they were doing. They focused in particular on the space launch. They have a great video we actually watched in the Institute that introduces their website and uses a rocket ship launching to like really illustrate it. And they also embraced the opportunity for all value. So a lot of their messaging starts with, we believe there should be an equal opportunity for every child, or every child should have the opportunity to succeed. Those are the two values or strategies that they've used the most.
And Sherri, I have a question about that. When, is that, the research better than the rest of us here, is that sufficient? Or, I mean, is that a good enough of a starting point to say that we embrace the value, or is there something else we should be doing in terms of that opportunity for all piece?
So it's a nice way to start to frame the conversation so that people start to pay attention to it and they are instantly on board with what you're telling them, because you're starting off with a value that triggers a really powerful cultural model that's very positive. But then if you immediately follow that up with another one of the recommended strategies, like giving concrete examples of equity and how that's going to ensure that we all have every opportunity to succeed. Or if you follow it up with something like the rocket launch, where you immediately talk about, we all believe every child should have the opportunity to succeed. everybody's got a really important role to play, like when you're launching a rocket. Like, so pairing those works really well, but the opportunity for all is a value that resonates with people across the board and gets them to start to think about your message in a really powerful way.
Okay, that's good to know. All right, Danny, you can go forward a little bit. First, you'll just see a zoom in of that rocket launch again, and you can go to the next one. All right, this is the letter I was telling you that Leslie wrote, but she's not here anymore to talk about what she did. But this is just an example of how we're trying at the Federation to integrate little pieces of this throughout our work. And so I'm going to try to, maybe I'll be able to draw to show you the part I want to bring to your attention. But right here, we have a couple of things. We have this, which, you know, we were just saying to Sherri, I wasn't sure if this was enough, but like that we're emphasizing that it's for all students. And then Leslie included when we all work together on a shared mission, student learning takes off. So again, it's a small thing, but I'm hoping that by weaving it throughout different programs and different approaches that we'll all start to see these strategies paying off and being kind of more a part of the way we communicate and talk about family engagement.
So
right.
I would actually make a couple of suggestions on this one, Cambria.
Please.
I love, love, love the shared mission, student learning takes off. That's my favorite part. I think you nailed it there. Supporting the learning of all students, to me, that doesn't sound the same as the opportunity for every student to succeed. The learning of all students is not the same as the opportunities, right? So I would just change that language slightly. And the other thing I would say is just above that, you talk about issues of educational equity, but we know most people don't understand, like majority of people think they're talking about the interest they have in their homes, and they do not understand equity when it comes to public education. So if you're going to talk about issues of educational equity, you really have to spell out what those are. So defining that in this letter.
That example of equity in our homes, it really, I, for the first time, really understand what you mean when you say people don't understand equity, because I was thinking that they don't understand exactly how it would play out in the certain context, but that's really a different and more extreme.
If we have time, I would love to show the video where the people are talking about equity, if you've got time for that.
Yeah, let's hold it off till the end, but yeah. Okay. All right, next one, Danny, I think is the last one. Oh, here, it worked this time. It made it bigger. I don't know why it works sometimes and not others. Okay, go ahead, Danny. All right, and then this is just a quick snippet from one of our newsletters from MASFEC, and what you'll see here is that we're using the space launch analogy again. So ensuring student opportunity isn't a one-person job. A good metaphor is a space launch. When a whole team of people works together, young people really take off. And our new project manager for another family engagement project, Rosalie, actually wrote this for us. So she's not here, but yay, Rosalie. All right, Sherri, do you have any feedback on this one?
I was just going to type it in. I actually think you are nailing the opportunity for all in your first paragraph. So you're talking about we work together to connect with one another around a shared goal of success for each and every student. That's an opportunity for all message. That's powerful.
All right. Yay. All right, fantastic. Next slide, Danny. All right, so then I just wanted to ask the group if anyone has any examples of how you've used reframing in the last year since we all met before within your organizations. Is there anything that you've been able to do? And if not, that's okay. That's why we're here again together today so that we can relaunch this.
Yes, last year, this is Adriana. Last year when before we went back to school in Woburn, we went back in hybrid mode. we were trying to create community-based space for the children who will have no parents available or able to be at home with them. And in the beginning, we heard a lot of negative feedback saying that there was a childcare issue, that the schools don't have responsibility to watch the kids while parents were at work. And we were able to reframe and say, no, this is an educational issue. And if it is education issue, the school needs to do something about it. And fast forward a little bit, we were able to create space in partnership with the YMCA and the Boys and Girls Club. The mayor gave us $1 million to run it, and we had close to 300 kids who attended it until April this year. So it was really the way you define your message, it really shapes what people are going to hear it. So I'm so excited to hear more about reframing today. We did it without knowing the reframing training existed. We just reframed it ourselves out of
That's great.
pure necessity.
So it sounds like maybe you were drawing on some of that interdependence piece. And you were definitely avoiding that, the pitfall of the triad, right? By bringing the community in.
Yeah.
Very cool. Does anybody else? Danny, can you stop sharing? Then we can just see each other. I think that works a little bit better. Okay. Anybody else been able to use reframing in the last year? Okay, we're going to do something about that then. So rather than doing breakout groups, since we're a small group, let's just stay together. And the next part of our session is for us to talk about what it is we can do to actually use the reframing. I keep almost saying framework because we do so much with frameworks. So I have a Jamboard, and in this Jamboard, we are going to put some ideas, and maybe we'll just do that independently for a few minutes. On page 1, it has how can you or do you bring reframing to life in your work? So I want to think really practically about things that we might do. And I'm going to put the link to the Jamboard here. And actually, I'll share my screen just for a moment so everybody can see how to use the Jamboard. I suspect that most people know how already because it's been quite a year and a half, but is everybody seeing the Jamboard? All right, Sherri can see it. Okay, so this says, how can you or do you bring reframing to life in your work? And so you're going to pick up a sticky note here. You might decide that you like orange is my favorite color, so I'll make mine orange. And then here I might write something that I want to do, which would be like review our materials for pitfalls, right? So maybe, get my staff together and we can spend a day going through all of our materials to make sure that we're not engaging in any of those things that Sherri showed us in the red area. So if we could spend a few minutes, everyone brainstorming some ideas of how you can actually use reframing in your work. And just to let you know what the next step will be, is on the next page, we're asking what support or information do you need to reframe family engagement? And so that basically means, what do you want me and Danny and Sherri and other people who are interested in reframing it and supporting you, what do you need from us to make that happen? And then after that, we're going to talk about our next steps. So right now, let's spend, what do you all think, 5 minutes filling out how can you or do you bring reframing to life in your work? Is everybody, yeah, we got quite a few people in there. So feel free to turn off your camera if you want to, and let's do a little bit of typing. Does anybody have questions about how to use the Jamboard? Okay.
I saw you tilting your head. You must be reading mine.
Okay, I forgot to keep time. I said 5 minutes, but I don't know how long we've been going. There's not as much of a flurry of activity. So I'm going to say we can go ahead and wrap up. If you have one more post-it to put up, go ahead.
Are we working on the second page as well?
We're about to switch to the second page. So were you working ahead?
Sorry, I think I was moving too fast.
That's okay. All right. So I just want to reflect on some of the ideas here, which are really great. We've got some people talking about reviewing materials, both for pitfalls and also to see where we can add strategies. We're talking about buy-in with district leaders. So important. Reading the framing report and recommendations. And when I email everyone after this, I'll make sure there are links to that. Participating in the class that Sherri's going to talk to us about in a minute. Printing the elements and having them handy and even putting them on your wall, someone said. Reviewing newsletter content, amazing. Talking to supervisors about mission and how resources are written. One-page documents that it looks like we have some links to now. Foregrounding teacher benefits and looking at cultural models we should avoid. Amazing. Sherri, I feel like you want to say something.
Yeah, I just wanted to say on famengage.org, there's a lot of resources, 2 in particular that are of interest to you. One is the Map the Gaps report, and that's where they outline all of the cultural models that were identified in the research. And then the other one is the framing recommendations. It's called Beyond Caring. And so they're 2 different reports. They're both really good. If you're interested in explicitly the cultural models, then Map the Gaps is where you want to start. If you're more interested in the actual recommendations, then Beyond Caring would probably be where you would want to start. Also on there, there's cheat sheets to help you think about each of the framing recommendations. And there's a booklet that you can download. And if you want multiple copies of the booklet, we have them in our office and we can send them to you. You just need to reach out to me and let me know so I can have them shipped.
That booklet is awesome. I have one of those in my office.
Yay. The one for cultural models is called Map the Gaps.
All right, and I'll send links to all of these things to everyone. Okay, so now let's just spend about 5 minutes telling us what you need. And let me just say that the sky's the limit in asking. If you all would like to meet regularly to talk about how you're reframing family engagement, we can make that happen. If you need a particular training for a particular group of people, we can make that happen. So here, let's just put some, lay it out there, what you think that we can do to help support the whole community in reframing family engagement.
Can I just talk it out a little bit? Because I don't know how to word this. So for me, it's more, we're doing the talk. There's a lot of information, but when you're actually doing I think it looks different for everybody. So for me, what I'd like to see is maybe some actual, I'm going to call it a role play for the lack of a better word, but just, to see what it looks like as you're doing it, because, we talk about it. We did like a little training. We were able to, we know what it is, but I guess putting it in action is a little different and it would look different for everybody. Because as we're all talking about this, I was thinking about a meeting that I had at one of the high schools with the family and the teachers. And usually my reframing for those type of meetings is a family meeting, because family is always going to be first. And then I always say, because they want to just throw information at you and not so much process it. It's more, there's a lot of little reframing, I guess, throughout the process. So that's why, like when we're talking about this, it's constant work and it looks differently for everybody. So I think normalizing that and having those conversations that it's, you know, when we talk about the bigger group or like the higher ups, that it's more modeling and your language, how we say things, it's going to make a difference. So I would love to see in action how it is that you guys are practicing it, so I could see if I'm doing it right or if I need to modify that kind of stuff.
Jackie, let me tell you, I feel exactly the same way. I felt like a little trepidation presenting our examples of reframing because we've just done it based on those 3 days we spent together. Fingers crossed that we're doing it right. And I think we all, maybe we need to have some of a community of reframing. Sherri, do you want to say something about that?
That's exactly what I was going to suggest. So it is really hard to go to a 2 or 3 day institute, and it's not even a full day. It's like 4 or 6 hours that you had of training a year ago, and then a couple hours today, and then suddenly change all of the ways that you communicate about family engagement. I think it would be a fantastic idea to do a community of practice where you could bring something that you're working on to a larger group and everybody could like chime in and work on it together. I think so I would also say going through the Reframing Academy that you guys will all have access to will strengthen your ability to even begin to do this work, because it's much more intense and it's go at your own pace, but it's essentially about 6 hours of content. And when I finish the workbook later this week, it'll be closer to 10. But if you go through that and then want to start a community of practice, I will join you in your community of practice if you want to meet maybe monthly and have opportunities to bring your problems of practice to each other. I couldn't do like this kind of training every month, but I could participate in a meeting where all of you were bringing your materials and we were talking about them together. Cambria, I'll let you like speak to that if that's something the SFEC would want to do or would want to like sponsor or host.
Yeah.
I'll just maybe after everybody goes through the Reframing Academy, we could reconnect and see if there's any interest in that. I've been doing a community of practice in Maryland where we meet monthly, and they've started right after the Maryland Institute, but unfortunately, nobody brought any problems of practice ever. And so it was me trying to fill the time every month, which was a huge commitment until we wrote the academy. And then we were able to use that group to pilot the different modules. But I can work with you, Cambria, and provide some support on this if you want to do this moving forward.
So I think what I would like to do is gauge interest in a community of practice. And so this email I'm sending you after this is getting longer and longer. And if I forget anything, you all just let me know. So we certainly would be willing to sponsor a community of practice for people to bring their problems of reframing to a group and get feedback. Another thing I'm wondering if it might be possible or helpful would be if there's a group of people that wants to go through the Reframing Academy together. And so I will pose those questions to you all in the email, maybe create like, a survey or something to see how many people would actually want to sign up to be part of a regular community like that. I just want to look at the Jamboard really quickly and see if there's anything else. All right, these are all, okay, great. I'm going to try to follow up with everything that you all have included here. And then I want to give Sherri a few minutes to talk about the Reframing Academy, and then maybe we can all talk together about how we could use that resource that NAFSCE is offering to let us have access to for free, which is lovely.
Yeah, we're charging $100 for the course, but we're going to give it to you guys at no cost. The coupon code, you'll see a slide at the end for that, but the coupon code is MASFEC. When you type that in, you'll get access to the course. So I'm going to share my screen and show you what I'm talking about. So this is the main course page, and then when you open it up, this is what the modules look like. There are 10 of them. If you go through all of the module and then you do the check for understanding is a practice quiz, then you can take an exam. Anybody who gets 80% on all of the exams will get a certificate of completion once they finish the course. And I wanted to share with you the video that I was talking about for equity. And so that is actually in here. Each of the modules starts with an introduction, the learning goals, sort of an agenda for the module, and then different content. So this is the equity video that I referenced.
So first is equity.
Can you guys hear it?
If you all have heard that term before, I might have some thoughts about what it might mean.
That's all like home equity,
some sort of loan.
You bought your house for say 200, 250, and some years later it's worth 400. That gap there is equity.
Equity in a life insurance policy, what you've built towards something, in my opinion, is equity.
Equity is kind of like basically how much leverage you have. So like you own a business or something, how much money like your business is worth.
Are you talking about money, money equality?
And if you think of equity in relation to race, what would be your guess of what it might mean?
Like racial equality, same thing? So is it equity, equality?
And the sense that I get is that when people are saying equity, they mean something more specific than when they're saying equality, but I definitely have not seen it explained.
Providing everybody with the same opportunities to be able to be successful, no matter like what level they're on.
I have not heard it mentioned as far as people. I mean, normally you hear of equity in your home.
Especially if you're poor and if you're Black, a lot of us, we like a couple generations removed from like slavery. So a lot of us are still trying to build from that gap and trying to get to that level where we have equity and stuff to leverage.
People have been saying racial equality forever. Why is it changing to equity now? Who's saying equity?
That video is such a great reminder that when we talk about equity, we know exactly what we mean, but often we're talking to people who think it means something completely different and they have no idea why we're even bringing it up. I just think it's really powerful. That was 2 different focus groups that were done by the Frameworks Institute, and you can tell in the video one focus group was with white people and one focus group was with Black people. And except for the one woman in the middle, even many of the Black people weren't able to define equity the way that we do. But none of the white people got it. So it's just a great reminder. So anyhow, you guys will have access to all of this when you go through the course. I'll actually go ahead and post a link to it in the chat box. Anybody have any questions about the Academy?
Sherri, approximately how many hours would it take one of us to go through it?
So you can go through and then stop and then start again at any point. Most of the videos are no longer than 5 minutes. You saw some of the videos today. All the videos I showed you today were from the Academy. Altogether, I think the Academy content is about 6 hours. The first 4 modules take the longest. Those are anywhere from 45 minutes to maybe 55. But then when you get to the recommendations towards the end, they're much shorter. So probably 30 minutes for most of the rest of them.
And how many modules were there?
There's 10 modules altogether.
Okay.
And the coupon code that's there will allow you to have access to the course through December 31st.
Well, I'm excited to take the course. I'm wondering if anybody wants to go through it with me, so I'm not all by myself. So maybe you can reach out to me if you want to do this together. Asiriani's with me. Yay. So if anyone else is interested, then we can certainly put our heads together and work through the modules together.
And I would love it if you guys go through the modules and you have any feedback at all, positive or negative. We would love to know what you think. It's just like recently done. And I really think it's the most exciting thing I've done in my whole career. And I've been doing this for like 170 years. So that's saying something. But I really am proud of the work that we did. But I know that there are ways that I could improve it that haven't even occurred to me. So if you guys find any of those and you want to share them with me, I will be your best friend forever.
Sherri's a good best friend to have too. She does these great favors like come in and do a refresher on reframing for you. Okay, Sherri, did you have other slides you wanted to share? I'm tempted to just, okay. So let me recap where we are based on what I have heard. So we've all been refreshed, but we're still not entirely sure how to reframe, or we don't have as, full confidence. So there are things that we want to do to continue this journey, I guess, in learning how to reframe family engagement. And so I'm going to send to you all links that we've discussed today, the slides from today, the video from today, and also a question about your interest in participating in a community of practice around reframing and possibly going through these wonderful modules together. Am I forgetting anything? Okay, then I'm going to ask you to go right back to Slido with me. I have to pull the link again, or if anyone's faster than me, you can grab it. And then let's see if we're in a better place now than we were an hour and 45 minutes ago. So if everybody could go to Slido quickly and let us know where you are in terms of feeling like you're comfortable to use reframing family engagement concepts. Oh, all right. We already have a higher number than we started with. It seems like. All right. Ooh, it's bumping up a little bit. All right. So it looks like we've gone from a 3.1 to a 3.9. So we've made some movement forward, and then maybe we can repeat this exercise as we get together in the future. Julie, I love your comment that we should keep each other accountable by doing this together. I agree completely, because I mean, my whole job involves reframing, and yet we've barely scratched the surface, right? So I should be doing a lot of this, and I need you all to hold me accountable, and we can all do that together. All right, does anyone have any questions or comments, or shall we give you 15 minutes of your time back?
I just want to say, if all of you go through the academy together and you have any, need any support or help or get stuck or just want to say hi, I'm here for you anytime. So don't hesitate to reach out if I can help you in any way.
Thank you, Sherri. We appreciate that offer. And I will tell you all that it's actually true. Lots of people say that, but Sherri actually does answer when we have questions.